The United States Marines have updated the makeup of the Marine Corps Rifle Squad for the first time in decades. The New York Times, not famous for its conservative bias, has put out an article critical of liberal mentalities, and it's ironically triggering millions. The Karate Kid is back with a YouTube reboot that does a remarkably good job of flipping the script on how to deal with childhood bullying and personal empowerment. The big question on everybody's mind: how will Silicon Valley culture screw this up? And the most unexpected news item of ever, something I never thought I would ever say: President Donald Trump may be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. It's Peace Through Superior Firepower today on The War Elephants Pass In Review. Okay, so talking about this Donald Trump, North Korea, possible Nobel Prize story. 18 Republican lawmakers pen letter of nomination to Norwegian Nobel Committee Chairman Berit Reiss-Andersen. The letter reads, "We respectfully nominate President Donald J. Trump to receive the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of his work to end the Korean War, denuclearize the Korean Peninsula, and bring peace to the region." Okay, so we got to set up the backstory on this one, because if any of you remember what was going on around August of this of last year, everybody was pretty sure World War III was about to start. Okay. Around that time, the North Koreans were testing a series of missiles that had actually reached the point of targeting United States cities. Also a part of this was an amped-up campaign to test the new presidency of Donald Trump to see if they would have the same leeway that they did under the last presidency. This, however, was met with an extraordinary amount of leverage placed on the North Koreans by Donald Trump's presidency. Most notably with Donald Trump's now famous words directing fire and fury to the North Korean regime if they don't pull back from their threats and hostile position towards the Americans.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. He has been very threatening.
This occurred after North Koreans threatened U.S. bases in Guam and even on the United States mainland with nuclear attacks. Following the president's fire and fury statements, U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis clarified the United States position. In a written statement, the former United States Marine Corps Commandant said, "The Democratic People's Republic of Korea must choose to stop isolating itself and stand down its pursuits of nuclear weapons," adding later that the regime's actions will continue to be grossly overmatched by ours, the Americans, and would lose any arms race or conflict it initiates. Secretary Mattis also warned that the North Koreans should cease any consideration of actions that would lead to the end of its regime and the destruction of its people. What followed was a series of maneuvers and U.S. military redeployments showing that the U.S. was serious to back up its threats. Basically, Trump and company said, "Little Rocket Man, we're tired of your nonsense." Fast forward to January, and warming relations between the South and North were about to culminate in the spectacle of a North Korean delegation at the Korean Winter Olympic Games, which South Korean President Moon Jae-in credited to Donald Trump. Bringing the matter forward to a few weeks ago, we saw the historic first time a North Korean dictator has stepped foot in South Korea, where Kim Jong-un and President Jae-in met to shake hands in a ceremony pointing to the long overdue end of the Korean War. This, South Korea's President Jae-in was quick to point out he still credits much to Donald Trump, and is also why the South Korean president has championed President Trump for the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize. For many Americans, the Korean War is something that happened a lifetime ago. It was an issue for our grandfathers, and it's something that happens in the back of the news every few years or so. But the fact is that the Korean War has been something that affects global movements ever since that time years ago. And an important fact to keep in mind, the Korean War never ended. No treaty signed, nothing. It just ended in a truce, a ceasefire that has lasted ever since our grandfathers were young men. Why is it such a big deal? Because this has been one of the potentially most devastating events in world history. For generations, North Korea has been this uncomfortable maybe. This thing that maybe will affect the entire world in the course of a weekend of terrible bad decisions. At any moment, they could have launched a nuke or launched an invasion or done something incredibly stupid that would have thrown the entire world into a war like we haven't seen since the Korean War. It would be a colossally devastating event, not only to the people of that region, but to the economies everywhere, pulling in China, pulling in the United States, pulling in Japan, pulling in European allies, and throwing the entire world into a very long period of conflict. Now, that was something that could have happened at any point since the end of the Korean War, or since the effective end of the Korean War, since the Korean War never officially came to an end. But now that the Korean War might actually be ending, and an opportunity to normalize relations with North Korea and the rest of the planet, now they're going to have this opportunity to take advantage of what the rest of us have, namely that of South Korea. When we compare any opportunity to test communism versus capitalism, we've seen vast inequalities, not only in the wealth created in the communist nations, but also in the human suffering also created in the communist nations. You look at North Korea versus South Korea. Many of our biggest products come from South Korea, where they've been able to infuse technology and infuse expertise into the global marketplace. A lot of your phones wouldn't be possible if not for South Korea. Okay, a lot of technology and a lot of wealth has come out of South Korea, mixing in with this global market, forcing a lot of wealth into South Korea. Now, North Korea could now be a part of that, allowing themselves to take advantage of the wealth that the rest of the world is willing to trade with them if they learn how to play a few new rules. By change of business, that means that many of the draconian policies that North Korea has had to implement to keep its system working are now going to have to go. But because they'll have access to a peaceful means of integrating with the rest of the world, it means they won't need them anymore. At the same time, no longer fearing the absolute devastation, the absolute destruction of their own regime, they'll be able to take a more peaceful stance, which means that a quarter of their nation will no longer have to be in the military and can be put to more productive, less militant uses. All that to say, North Korea, which has been the iconic, terrifying regime of nightmares, will now just get to be another country, another place that produces things, another place that's getting wealthier, and another place that's no longer being horrific to its own people. Now, if you want to take the South Korean president's word on it, Donald Trump had a lot to do with that. As if the president of South Korea's word wasn't enough, Trump also has supporters in Europe, such as British politician Nigel Farage, arguing that Donald Trump deserves this medal far more than President Obama ever did. Farage made the statement that Obama got the Nobel Prize for what he might do, where he says that Trump deserves the medals for managing to get talks going with North Korea, something that no U.S. president has ever managed to do. What Farage is referring to is President Barack Obama being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 9 days after he took office. He was actually awarded the prize only months into his first year in office. The Norwegian Nobel Committee said, "Very rarely has a person to the same extent as Obama captured the world's attention and given its people hope for a better future." Others have justified the medal as that he made the world have more confidence in America going forward after the Bush presidency years. Yet others have stated that it was because of his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples. Again, remember, his nomination came 9 days after taking office. So he didn't actually do anything. Many rightly viewed that the Nobel Prize had become a politically driven popularity contest rather than an actual award for work which had been done in the effort of seeking peace throughout the world. This was especially highlighted during the actual presidency of Barack Obama. By pulling out of Iraq, he made way for the maturation and explosion of the Islamic State, something which numerous advisors warned him against, not the least of which being the president immediately before him. After the capture of Osama bin Laden, many criticized the president for phoning in the war in Afghanistan, which went on throughout his entire presidency. He also made attacks in Libya, which mirrored the same attacks that he was critical of whenever it happened with the Bush administration in Iraq. His policies were disastrous for the war in Syria, while also enabling and encouraging terrorist attacks by both Saudi Arabia and especially Iran. This isn't even mentioning how little was done to combat militaristic adventures by the Russians, or that the Obama administration did nothing to stop the North Koreans from testing nuclear weapons when they had only started in 2012. All that said, President Barack Obama's tenure as President of the United States was disastrous for world peace. That record brought a lot of questions to the Nobel Prize Committee's processes. And it wasn't even the only recent controversial decision to give someone who may not have deserved it the Nobel Peace Prize. Some might remember that in 2007, former Vice President Al Gore also received the Nobel Peace Prize for his work making a movie. Critics of that prize also stated that they believed the nomination committee awarded the prize based mostly on a political statement rather than awarding someone who had actually earned the prize through efforts to make and maintain peace. Critics for Gore's work, The Inconvenient Truth, contained no less than the High Court of England, which stated that the movie contained no less than 9 gross errors. The errors the High Court mentioned were specifically crafted to support Gore's argument and included alarmist fudging of facts regarding the rising sea levels, unfounded claims of effects of global warming, and the manipulation of statistics. Perhaps most concerning are Gore's refusals to deal with inaccuracies found throughout the movie and which now serve as the basis for his newest project, An Inconvenient Sequel. All this to say, the Nobel Prize Committee has awarded some extremely controversial choices, and there are many who criticize the committee for watering down the purpose of the medal to something which is now just a political popularity contest. Given the precedent that they've established for Barack Obama and Al Gore, who have achieved very little in the means of peacekeeping, President Trump has achieved a great deal with what's happened in South Korea. He was credited for bringing an end to one of the most colossal conflicts of the last century. If the South Korean president's testimony means anything, this means that he was certainly one of the most important people towards the progression of peace in the year of 2018. And to compare his actual achievements with the potential achievements that President Obama was awarded for, it leaves many saying that for the Nobel Peace Prize Committee to maintain any validity and any respect, they're going to have to award President Trump with the award. Now, many in Europe, many in the European community are appalled by this idea. However, when you look at the facts for the Nobel Prize for Peace to mean anything, they have to award it to Trump. Otherwise, their blatant hypocrisy in awarding it to previous candidates is going to leave the award meaning absolutely nothing for generations to come. The New York Times has a new piece which has left liberals across the internet triggered and outraged. In one of those cases where you actually can judge the article by its title, liberals, you're not as smart as you think, by professor of political science at the University of Virginia, Gerald Alexander, is causing a major debate. Now the debates normally take the position of outraged liberals sharing it to their Facebook, looking for help and solace in understanding how anybody could say something so terrible. In other cases, it's conservatives sharing proudly and blatantly, "Ha! Somebody finally said it." While their liberal friends will show up and say that this is just more mean talk from the right. However, Mr. Alexander brings up a lot of good points that are worth considering. Some of his prominent points deal with the fact that because the left and liberals have major control over prominent institutions dealing with the American culture, that's caused them to lose touch with the American people, and that they're actively making more mistakes that's driving the country farther away from them. Now, by this, he mentions not only the media, but also universities, which I've touched on before as well. Alexander begins his piece by talking about how people often vote against things as much as they vote for them, and that many liberals know this, which is part of why they go to such extremes to paint conservatives, to paint Trump voters, to paint anyone on the right side of politics as something completely without goodness. But as one can imagine, this mentality has its drawbacks. Given the undeniable loathing that many in the media have directed towards the president, and by extension, the poor Trump voters too stupid or racist not to vote for him, people are shifting away from listening to liberal celebrities, liberal media, liberal professors, and noting the extreme personal bias they have against all of these individuals. He cites the recent White House Correspondents' Dinner, which has become predictable to most Americans in that they know it's a time where we're going to see unmitigated Trump bashing. For many, the event is nothing more than a pretentious, self-righteous media congratulating itself as it does nothing but trying to burn the presidency down. Whether that's true or not, perception is reality. The American people, both liberal and conservative, are beginning to see people like Michelle Wolf as the personification of the one-sided toxicity of the American media. He also notes that progressives dominate not only the news media industry, but also entertainment and the universities as well. Mr. Alexander goes on to point out that when your view dominates entertainment, news, and the education industries, all three of which have shown evidence of trying to filter out and blacklist conservatives from working with them, then high-ranking people in these industries, such as celebrities or professors, start to view themselves not as conveyors of information or even entertainment, but as ambassadors of righteousness. Now, that's my term, not Alexander's, but Alexander does say that when this evolution happens, they start to view themselves as far more powerful than they actually are. They speak on subjects which they have no expertise on, but are simply communicating popular views. Since, however, the entire culture agrees with them, they've never faced critical viewpoints or any opposing views whatsoever on things that they take as patent fact. In so doing, they have no sensitivity whatsoever to when they say things that are patently false or extremely inflammatory to huge swaths of the population. In some cases, their bubbles are so thick that whenever massive amounts of people are deeply troubled by the statements they're making, statements which may not be true in the slightest but are deeply demeaning towards a lot of people, they simply dismiss this as bigots who are mad that someone finally called them out. They become completely blind or dismissive to the outrage their one-sided views create among many, many people. So whenever things like Donald Trump happen, they're completely blindsided by the fact. And this becomes even more apparent when someone from their side crosses a line. By this, I'm referring to the recent Kanye scandal, where a black celebrity would ever disagree with all the other celebrities. By seeing the treatment that he's received, it comes off less as a sophisticated world of celebrities and professors trying to educate the rest of the world, as so much as a very tyrannical and domineering culture, angry and fighting back against anyone who would ever disagree with them. Put all this together, and liberals as a culture are becoming very good at creating little more than resentment. Alexander reaches the point of his article where he cites numerous instances where liberals became outraged at what to the rest of the world appeared to be a non-event because they specifically failed to communicate what, if anything, was wrong with it, but were fine with demeaning millions of people because they were bigots. This, he goes on to say, became much worse during the Obama years, where liberals became more convinced that conservatives were their intellectual and moral inferiors. And during this time, liberals actually became, in so doing, intolerant to different views. This went all the way up to the president himself, who famously said during the 2008 campaign that Rust Belt voters would get bitter, they cling to their guns or religion or antipathy of people who aren't like them. Given the nature of this article, that last part rings startlingly ironic. Alexander also calls for liberals to try not to act so certain that racism, prejudice, and bigotry are the only motivators for why someone would disagree with them and why the world isn't perfectly equal. Self-righteousness, he says, can get things wrong. He closes the piece by warning liberals that they're currently in a self-reinforcing cycle. He says in his closing paragraphs, when they use their positions in American culture to lecture, judge, and disdain, they push more people into an opposing coalition that liberals are increasingly prone to think of as deplorable. That only validates their own worst prejudices about the other America. I'll say this on the piece. I'm glad somebody finally said it. Or at the very least, I'm glad somebody at the New York Times finally said this. Now, granted, this is in the opinion section, but I'm happy that the New York Times said it. They are a magazine that I've been highly critical of because they've done very little to try to reach out to conservatives following what was a disastrous lead-up to the 2016 election. They actually came out saying, we did a horrible job over the last decade of holding the president and holding liberals accountable for anything. And they were actually a huge part of the problem. Now, since then, they haven't really done that much better. But this is an interesting article, I think, because it's very critical of liberal mentalities and speaks to a lot of the concerns, a lot of the outrage from the rest of America. As well as helping many on the left understand why so many of the people who used to support them have disappeared. Like that's something that I'm seeing that a lot of people aren't really aware of, is how many are abandoning the left from seeing really how they act, or like seeing how they treat conservatives, or even seeing how they treat each other. I've got one friend who he's been a liberal for years, but he's now very bothered by the fact that he can't have polite conversations with other liberals, and that the only people who are actually nice to him in conversations are conservatives who we all understand don't agree with any of his policies. But he knows that we're the only people who will treat him with respect while we can disagree with him. This is something that many on the left are just simply not aware. This is happening to them. They're being abandoned by their own behaviors. Part of me was wondering why the New York Times would even publish this, being that the liberal audiences is specifically their target market. They've officially abandoned conservatives. They've abandoned, red America, and this is who they're targeting. So this article I found very surprising. But what I think is happening is that the New York Times, if they're still trying to be biased, which they very may well be, this is a warning. This is a warning where they're trying to say, look, we're going to lose again if this behavior doesn't stop. And if that's the case, keep doing what you're doing. But what I found the most interesting was that whenever this article started showing up in my Facebook feed, I follow a lot of different people. Many liberals are in my circle of influence, and whenever I saw this article start coming up, it was with the same sense of dismissal and sometimes outrage that the article actually outlined. So I'm wondering how much of an impact this is actually going to have on the people it's directed to actually read it. Something that I'm wondering is if a lot of the people who have been silently abandoning the left are just silently reading this article, and it makes sense, while the people who outright are willing to have a conversation openly don't realize that the way that they talk about this article is proving the article true. Changing gears to the Marine Corps, the Marines are switching up the traditional makeup of the United States Marine Corps Rifle Squad. General Neller, the Commandant of the United States Marine Corps, has announced this week that the Marines are going to be switching up from the 13-man squad to a 12-man squad. Articles published from the Marine Times have stated that the reason for this has come from experience and lessons learned over the past 17 years of warfare, as well as some new technologies that have come out that have seriously augmented the ability of the Marines under this new setup. All right, now I'm seriously excited about some of these new changes. So let's talk about what the Marine Corps Rifle Squad used to look like and how it's going to be different under this new system. Okay, so this is the Marine 13-man rifle squad as it exists today. It's led by a Marine squad leader, which is typically a sergeant, one of the senior Marines of a platoon. The squad leader will carry out the platoon commander's orders and directives, acting as a semi-autonomous unit, and basically autonomous enough that they can handle things in a pretty large area. And typically, you won't see major operations happening where whole platoons are interacting with themselves, are interacting to take care of one mission. You'll have a lot of times where the individual squad is fighting the battle by themselves, where another squad might be many blocks away, or in a whole different area of the city. So, the squad leader's job is extraordinarily important. Keep that in mind because that role is going to be changing a little bit here on the next slides. Now, underneath the squad leader, the squad, first of all, isn't even the base unit. Below that is the fire team, and what you can see here are 3 separate fire teams beneath the squad leader. The fire team is the base unit. This is sort of the theory of the Marines to keep everything uniform enough so that a person can change platoons, can change companies, can change to a whole different part of the Marine Corps, and it has a general understanding of how to fight, no matter if you're in a different team with different people or not. But adaptable enough at the squad level that you can have a lot of different capabilities and achieve a great deal of different types of missions. Now, the way they do this is by looking at the diversity within each one of the fire teams. All right, so first, the basic fire team consists of a fire team leader. That's typically a corporal. That he's just the commander of this small element. Okay, this small element is the fire team leader. Been in a while, not quite to the sergeant squad leader level, but capable of commanding and overseeing and directing his team of 4 people. Okay, after that is the automatic rifleman. Now, the automatic rifleman, they carry machine guns. Okay, that's what they did. This was actually the crux of the theory, was that you would have somebody within a team of 4 who could lay down suppression fire, and that would enable whoever the target of the team was to be held in place long enough for the others to go around. Now, there's far more to it than that, but the machine gunner in the old way of doing things had a great deal of importance in that he directed how the rest of the unit would move around, because he really guided the enemy as much as the rest of the team would move around them. So there's going to be a lot of changes to this. This is what I'm going to be interested in seeing about how the actual tactics of these new fire teams will play out, because, and you'll see what the big change with this one is, that they really changed the way that the Marines treat this automatic rifleman. Now, like I said, the automatic rifleman was such an important job and carried such a specialized weapon for the job that there was actually a person within each fire team designated to assist the automatic rifleman, the assistant automatic rifleman. So this person's whole job was to act as another infantryman, but to ensure that this gun stays up. If something were to happen to that automatic rifleman, they would take over that job. If they would carry additional ammunition. Their job, this automatic rifleman's job, was so important that there's another person assigned just to make sure he stays okay. And this last position is that of rifleman. This is the basic of the basic. Okay, this is your standard infantry Marine. Now, that might be specialized a little bit depending on skill sets, but this is your standard Marine. Now, as you can see, there were 3 teams exactly like this, all reporting to one senior squad leader. This is the basic makeup of the Marine Rifle Squad. Okay, now let's see what the Marines are doing to change that up. All right, and here is the new makeup of the Marine Rifle Squad. Now, you'll notice a few things right off the bat. First is the squad leader is no longer alone. Now his job hasn't really changed. His job is still to be that sergeant level individual who commands the entire squad, but now he is actually in charge of an entire team. Now, what you'll also notice is that the teams themselves have changed. There's now first off, they got rid of the they got rid of the assistant automatic rifleman, and I'll explain why here in a minute. And they also got rid of the standard rifleman. Now, but first let's talk about this command element team. Now, like I said, the squad leader stays about the same, but they've implemented a new assistant squad leader. Now, the assistant squad leader is going to be a corporal. It's going to be somebody who is an NCO, been in the Marines a while, been in the infantry a while, and their purpose is to help a squad leader deal with increasingly complex tasks and operations, which is really aimed at something that the Commandant mentioned was going to be a necessity going forward. Actually, this goes all the way up to the Secretary of Defense, General Mattis, who stated that the job of the basic infantry, the regular forces, are going to start resembling that of special forces. Some of the tasks that we've expected of special forces over the last 17 years of warfare are going to start falling more and more onto regular infantry. We saw an example of this back in Syria, where roughly 400 Marines were deployed last year to back Syrian Democratic Forces fighting Islamic State militants, and there they provided artillery and fire support. That's typically a special forces job. In Afghanistan, we saw a detachment of 300 Marines who worked as advisors for the Afghan security forces. That's typically a special forces mission. Then, looking to Iraq, Marines and other small teams are deployed throughout the area in various mission sets all over the place, which would have typically fallen on special forces. So what the assistant squad leader, what that's really showing is that they expect the job of the Marine Rifle Squad to become much more complex, so much so that a single squad leader is going to be extraordinarily challenged to keep up with the complexity of the mission. So the assistant squad leader is going to be someone senior enough to advise and to help with some of the more mundane tasks of leadership, so that squad leader can take on and evolve into these more complex roles. All that to say is that the Marines are planning on making changes that acknowledge that warfare is going to become a lot harder for the next generation of the next generation of warfighter than has been in the past. Now, the old rifle squad was not inadequate, but they're taking a proactive step to acknowledging, stuff's about to get harder. So we're going to stay ahead of that. We're going to ask more of our Marines, and that's what this assistant squad leader symbolizes directly, is the acknowledgement that the Marine Rifle Squad is going to become much more important in the future towards much more special forces type missions. They need to be adaptable, and they need to have more leadership. Okay, the next seriously cool thing to talk about is this guy. This is going to be the systems operator, and his job is to be the tech guy for the infantry unit. Okay, so this systems operator, it's going to be a lance corporal, which means a guy who's been in for a minute. He's done all the training, but he's one of the low guys on the totem pole. However, what they're going to pull out is that the most tech-savvy member of these teams are going to become the systems operator for the squad level. And what that means is that any new technologies that come out, and it's going to be happening fast, they're going to start seeing all the new technologies that are being implemented over the next couple of years, over the next decade or so. And these technologies are going to be coming at the Marines so fast that they're going to need a person whose job is to figure out how best to implement those technologies for the squad and advise the squad leader on how best to implement them. They're going to be issued a Marine tablet, as well as probably some other goodies to come in the future. But as new technologies become available, it's going to be one Marine's sole job to figure out how best to use those technologies and how to train the other Marines in how best to use them. As well as, and this is going to be pretty cool, the new squads are going to be issued things like a personal quadcopter. This is going to be a change that happens now. So some of those things that you've seen with special forces using quadcopters for reconnaissance, using new technologies for new missions, this guy's actually going to be doing. He's going to be using that tablet to communicate with other elements nearby, as well as using their technologies like that quadcopter to recon and direct the Marines in ways that we've never seen before. So immediately, this guy makes the Marines like 1,000 times more sci-fi, and actually bringing sci-fi to reality. Like this new role in the squad is going to be one of the most interesting changes to the Marines. But again, it shows that the Marines know changes are coming, but it's impossible to know what those changes will be. But they're already creating a system that will allow for new change. This person's job is to understand how technology will change the Marines and how to help his Marines evolve in the best way possible. So this isn't going to be a new job, by the way. This isn't going to be, they're not going to go to some special school to do this. It's just going to be the Marine in the platoon who's the most tech savvy, who gets stationed with, all right, you're that nerd and you're going to figure this out. But still, it's a very, very, very cool evolution, and I think that as far as lethality, this is going to dramatically increase how well Marines are able to adapt to a changing warfare in a way that our enemies will absolutely be devastated by. Okay, going back and looking at the individual fire teams, we noticed that some things changed. First of all, we noticed that they're down to 3 men rather than 4. Mostly what this comes down to is that they got rid of the assistant automatic rifleman. Now, why would they do that? That's because they've completely changed the way that the automatic rifleman's job is going to work, in that no longer are Marines all going to be using the M4, but they're now transitioning to a new weapon system called the M27. Now, the M27 is the infantry automatic rifle, and what it does is that it's going to be given to all of these Marines. Everyone is going to be using the M27. Okay, everyone is going to be an automatic rifleman. Now, the idea behind this was that by making everyone an automatic rifleman, you change up the squad to make it 300% more lethal in how much capability they all have now to fire. Now, there are some limitations with the M27 relative to the old M249. The SAW, the squad automatic weapon. It is a magazine-fed weapon, which meant that Marines burning through ammunition can run out of ammunition very easily, if they're not trained well, which the Marines will be trained well. But that's something that's made a few people nervous as far as switching the entire squad out to an automatic weapon. However, what this does is that it changes that relationship that I talked about earlier, to where everything hinged on this automatic rifle, or excuse me, this one automatic rifleman, and everyone moved around what he was directing fire towards, to now anyone can be the person creating that suppressive fire. Anyone can be that person creating suppressive fire, and anyone else can maneuver around them. This is a huge element in how Marines are going to be able to move, and how they're going to be able to take down an enemy that they've got suppressed already. So now everyone is an automatic rifleman, and there's no need for that assistant. That frees up 2 spots, which have now moved over to the command element, and has allowed for another evolution. Now, this is possibly the coolest evolution that I've seen, and this is the implementation of a grenadier in every fire team. Okay, so now every squad is going to be equipped with 3 different grenadiers. Now, that's exactly what it sounds like. These guys will be launching grenades like it's not even funny. Now, what a lot of civilians aren't aware of is that grenade technology is actually far more complex than just the pull the pin and throw the grenade types of weapons that you see. There's what's called the 40 millimeter grenade, which is it's packaged a lot more like a round in that it's meant to be fired from a weapon specifically made to fire grenades. Now, what that does is that, first of all, it allows for a lot more evolution in grenade technology. You can do a lot of things with these grenades that you can't do with your standard grenade that you would just carry on your person. Some things, just to make an example, is that you're able to create what are called loom rounds, which is a grenade that you fire straight up into the air, and it illuminates the battlefield for during the night, and it puts off an extraordinarily powerful light that you can see. Everyone can see what's going on around you. Now, this puts a huge advantage in people who are specialized in night fighting, but it's something that can't be done when you're fighting somebody. Like, if you're an insurgent, then you don't have these means. But this is something completely new and completely different that it's been around for a while. We've had grenades like this for quite a while, but we never had a person designated to fire just as a grenadier. Now, what did used to happen was that we had the squad leader. He was equipped with a grenade launcher, the M203. And the M203 was an attached weapon that was attached to the Marine's rifle. And I'll show you an example of that with this new version that's coming out. Even when we're talking about traditional grenades, the grenade launcher allows you to fire about 10 times farther than you would be able to throw it. Now, anybody can see the advantage of this in that you're able to put an extraordinarily lethal weapon extremely far out into ranges that your enemy can't reach you, able to disrupt enemy formations, able to take down entire positions in ways that are completely devastating to a force unprepared for it. Now, remember, that was the squad leader. The squad leader was the only person who had this weapon. Under the new system, we've got 3 different people who will have this means. And what that means for the actual squad, is that now you're going to have everyone in the unit capable of creating that suppressing fire, but you're also going to have one guy in every fire team, every 3-man team is going to be absolutely capable of raining down devastation on that suppressed group. Now think about some of the means that we had before. We could use one team that could suppress, but then everybody else was going to have to go around and flank them in some way. We had several means for that. If you were lucky, you would be close enough to the squad leader that while they were suppressed, he could fire a grenade at that suppressed position and take out the enemy. But now, within just this 3-man team, you've got that capability. You can have suppression, and then you can have somebody to lay down grenades. And if worse comes to worse, you've still got that fire team leader who can adjust fire and focus on other people. Now, this is an extremely adaptable model for really raining down devastation at the individual level. So I'm really excited about this new grenadier position. Yeah, and by the way, this is what they'll actually be equipped with. This is the M320 grenade launcher, and while I'm not gonna lie, if you've been trained to think about guns only in ways that movies and video games tell you, this is a really stupid looking weapon. However, when you look at what it adds to the individual unit, this is an extremely powerful capability to add. But I will say, I don't actually like the fact that it's a standalone weapon. Now, when we saw the images that the Marine Corps put out, they showed it as the Marines carrying 2 different weapons. I don't like that, because anybody who plays Call of Duty knows. Like, that's what Call of Duty would be like in real life, is carrying a bunch of weapons that you find. Anybody who has been that big guy in the team, me, knows that it sucks to be the one who has to carry around everything. And it also can be extremely burdensome and get in the way of how you fight. So what I'm wondering is if they're going to go with a way that we used to use the M203. Now, the M203 was attached to the weapons. And it looked a lot more like this. Okay, this is the M4 with the M320 attachment. Now you see what that is that you've got the M4, but you also have down here the M320 it's attached. Like an armor actually puts that on to where when you carry around one, you carry around both. It's got sighting to where you can fire both, and it allows them to just carry on one weapon. So what I'm wondering is if this is going to be much more normal for Marines carrying the M27 with an M320 attachment. I don't know, but I really hope that's the way it goes in the future, because it just seems like it would be much less of a hassle to the individual Marines who are already going to be loaded with tons of ammunition for the M27, and now this guy's also going to be carrying down a lot of grenades attached as well. So anyway, I hope we see something like this, partly just for cool factor, but also because it's going to suck to be that grenadier if he's got to lug around tons and tons of stuff that's flopping all over the place while he fights. Now, one thing also to add in is that every squad is going to be equipped with the Carl Gustav, the M3 Moz, known as the multi-role anti-armor, anti-tank weapon system, which is basically the big gun. It fires as you can see behind it, it fires a variety of different projectiles that can do. Creativity is your only limitation. Okay, it can blow stuff up really well. So every squad is going to have a Moz. Also with every squad, one of the Marines will be designated as the squad marksman. What they'll be equipped with is the M38, which is essentially an M27. It's the same weapon as everybody else gets, but equipped with a powered scope, suppressor, and a rangefinder, which I'm not sure if all of them have. Their weapon is going to be specialized to reach out and engage with the enemy at around 300 to 600 yards to make sure that they can still handle that. All these changes are really bringing the fight in a lot closer and trying to keep it within that 200 yards, to really specialize within 200 yards. However, they really want to ensure that somebody within the squad can handle and will be proficient at keeping the enemy at a distance where it's possible. So this Marine will be capable of engaging the enemy at 300 to 600 yards. But what's still interesting about it is that they're using essentially the same weapon as everybody else on the team. Now, there are some other changes from the standard Marine setup, including, like I said earlier, that tablet, which will be used by the systems operator. He'll also be in charge of a quadcopter, I believe. There's some other tech that they'll be carrying. All the changes considered, I'm really excited about this new setup for the Marines. You know, people from my era, people who trained with the 13-man squad, I think a lot of us will have disagreements about it, but from everything I'm seeing in a lot of the community, they're really excited about the changes that are happening. It seems that this wasn't a change that absolutely had to happen. It wasn't a change that was forced upon the Marines. It was one that they saw, you know, the times are changing and they're going to be changing more in the future. So we need to have a more adaptable system for implementing the Marines we have. This is something that utilizes Marines better. It frees up one Marine to serve somewhere else, as well as makes better use of the Marines that they already have. It's got a system for engaging with new technology that comes out in the future, not just the technology that exists today. It's got new means to help the squad adapt to more complex and more engaging mission sets. And I think that what General Neller communicated with this new system is that this is a great new evolution for the Marines, and that they will be faster, they will be more lethal, they will be more adaptable, and the Marine Corps will remain one of the world's premier fighting forces for at least another generation to come. But I want to open it up to you guys. Do you think that the new reforms happening with the Marine Corps Rifle Squad are going to ultimately be good for Marine combat efficiency? Or do you think that this is a huge waste of time and is going to make us a less capable force? I want to hear your opinion, so shout it down at the bottom. The Karate Kid saga continues in a YouTube original series centered around the villain of the original movie, Johnny Lawrence of Cobra Kai. So first, an intro into me and the Karate Kid. First off, as a kid whose mom took him to the movies growing up, I watched them like they were the coolest thing in the world. Even today, as a full-grown man, what kind of gifts does my mom give me for Christmas? The box set, including Karate Kids 1, 2, 3, and the regrettable next Karate Kid. The series was something I really identified with. I was the one doing the wax on, wax off stuff to all the windows in my house, which by the way is an incredibly terrible way to clean a window. Because of it, I was also that little nerdy kid whose mom enrolled him in martial arts, Taekwondo, where I eventually earned my black belt. Yay! And even went to a few tournaments and won a few trophies. Yay! All that to say, I've been a serious fan of the Karate Kid movies, and hope that there would be something to bring them back since the last two flops that have been put out. That said, I was really worried that a Silicon Valley company, YouTube, owned by Google, all who have had a very troubling history dealing with imbuing their biases into their products, getting in control of my beloved childhood franchise. It made me pretty nervous. But I watched the first two episodes, and they seemed good. I was a little worried about them roping me in, but I signed up for the free month of Red to try out the series, and I actually liked it. I'll get into more of that here in a minute, but first I want to talk about some things that the Cobra Kai series actually did really well, namely in keeping with many of the traditional themes of the franchise. Okay, so the most important theme of Cobra Kai is this theme of bullying and how to deal with it. It's taken on what now exists as a very conservative view on bullying, in that you can't change society, you can't change other people. The only thing that you can actually do is to empower yourself so that you will not be the victim. If you look at schools today, a lot of them take on this anti-bullying stance, a zero-tolerant stance on bullying. But what it actually translates to is, in my mind, after working in schools for about 3 years and studying this phenomenon across the country with all the writing that I've done on bullying specifically, what the schools really come out with doing is passing a lot of feel-good rules that make the teachers and administration feel as if they've done something by saying, we want to make this a safe space for kids. We want everyone to feel appreciated and loved, and we want everyone to feel safe. Now, that's good for them. It's good for them to say that they've done something, and it's really good for them on a legal standing when something goes wrong. However, this doesn't address why kids get bullied. It doesn't address why some kids feel the need to bully others. It doesn't address the fundamental aspects of power imbalance in childhood psychology, in child social structures. It doesn't address the why of bullying, and so it doesn't solve the problem. What it ends up doing is actually preventing a lot of kids who need to learn how to stand up for themselves, who need to go through that process. It prevents them from being able to, because what ends up happening is that these zero tolerance issues always come up whenever a kid actually says enough is enough. He'll end up getting punished. Maybe the bully will too. It creates these incredibly toxic cultures where the bullies are actually incentivized by the rules that are in place. They're able to psychologically dominate everyone around them because no one is equipped to put a bully in his place. Now, this is the exact opposite of Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai acknowledges these few human truths about being a kid growing up, especially growing up as a boy, though it's also true for girls, as is shown in the series. Cobra Kai actually takes an opportunity to poke fun at this idea where a school principal says in a half-hearted fashion that she wants to make a school a safe place after a parent complained. So right there off the bat, you see that schools only really care about bullying when it becomes a problem for them. They're not out to to make these schools a safer place. They're basically following a script of legality so that they can do something about it. Now, is that the type of environment that you want to be in? No, because kids are going to be bullies, and they are bullies. That's the theme throughout these first several episodes. And they poke fun at this principal for saying that she wants to create a safe space right after she starts lecturing on not having too sexy costumes. So it doesn't mean anything, and it's not protecting kids. What does protect kids is the main character going and reaching out for someone to teach him karate. Exactly the same as the original movie. Now, it shows this kid who gets bullied routinely, who sees an adult figure who knows how to take care of himself. Well, I should say knows how to defend himself from a gang. And this kid reaches out to that person, caring nothing about what else is going on in his life, just to get that ability to take care of himself. Now, this mirrors that first story, that first time that Daniel-san reached out to Mr. Miyagi. But it's different because this time it's Johnny Lawrence who's terrible at taking care of himself in any way other than martial arts. But eventually Lawrence takes on the young Miguel Diaz as a student, and through that process, this isn't a very big spoiler alert. They show it in the promos. Diaz beats up all of his bullies in a glorious act of self-defense. Therein really cementing the message that no adults in society will ever come to your rescue 100% of the time. So the Karate Kid movies make clear, as does Cobra Kai, that adults won't save you. Only you will save you. Okay, now I really wish that kids were taught this. I really wish that kids got this message. So I'm really thinking about putting a poll down somewhere, or just tell me if you'd like to see this, if you'd like to see how Cobra Kai teaches kids how to stand up for themselves. Like I'm really thinking about making a video about that, but all that, I really hope that more kids get this message that you need to stand up for yourself. It's the only actual way to take care of bullying. Now, when we create those really repressive cultures where bullying doesn't get solved by a kid feeling empowered to stand up for themselves, then it creates the environment that gets so toxic that you have kids who give up on life, become deeply resentful, and I'll say honestly, I think this is how we get school shooters, is kids who are bullied but never feel that they have the means to take care of themselves. Now, Miguel Diaz doing exactly the opposite. He's learning how to take care of himself. He's learning how to defend himself. He's learning how to be a good kid while not being a victim. And I think that whatever you think about that, that's a kid who's never going to bring a gun to school to handle his problems. Okay? It's a kid who has created peace not only for himself but for others, and who has stomped some evil tyranny within his social circle, and that's not going to be a place where you're going to see a school shooting. Now, I really hope that that's the message that they keep going throughout the series, but they communicate it very well in that first chapter. So, having said all of that, I just wanted to say some other things that I liked about the series, and then a few things I didn't like. First of all, something that has to be addressed every time you ever watch a Karate Kid movie or these Karate Kid shows, that is not how you teach martial arts. As long as just we all know you can't teach martial arts with the wax on, wax off methods, or Cobra Kai is actually hilarious in that they have the same things, but they do it completely differently. The Johnny Lawrence method of wax on, wax off is hilarious to watch, but please don't think you're going to become a ninja or a martial arts master at karate. Like it takes more than 6 months to get a black belt, as they're all shown having black belts by the end of it. Just no. All right, what I really want to talk about is the casting. I really loved the casting. I really enjoyed the whole casting on the whole show. Let's just get out of the way. First there's Ralph Macchio and William Zabka. Sure. The ones playing Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence. Okay, they were good. They were enjoyable. It was fun seeing them again. But I'm not going to sit around celebrating them too long because they've literally been playing these two roles their entire lives. I mean, since 1984, they have been Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence. They better have figured it out by now. But I do want to talk about the show's young cast, like a lot of the kids who eventually enter the Cobra Kai dojo and a lot of the other kids features in the show, because they were really enjoyable. I really enjoyed watching a lot of these kids. So first off, we got to talk about this main kid, Miguel Diaz. He's the new Daniel-san of the Cobra Kai series. He's that dorky nerdy kid who, you know, kind of like She's All That, is actually extraordinarily handsome when you actually take even a half second to look at him. But he's that dorky nerdy kid who gets bullied and beat up because the other kids are just so mean, and reaches out to the first person he ever sees able to defend himself and asks him to be his sensei. Now, the kid who played him, Zolo Mariduena, butchered. He actually did a really good job, both in carrying the load as the TV show's main child protagonist, which included both the training for this. He had to do a lot of physical training for this. He had to do a lot of at least choreography to make the martial arts look good, as well as delivering a really good performance. He was both very good at communicating that physicalness that you need to the show, but during the other times, he was a very likable character. You know, you felt that sympathy for him, and whenever he was succeeding outside of martial arts, there's a little love arc, but when he was succeeding in that, it was very enjoyable. You felt really good when good things happen to the guy, and so I mean that it takes a good actor. There's a lot of actors out there who just kind of want to choke, but he did a very good job. So I'm thinking, you know, this kid's gonna do pretty well. I really hope to see him, to see him in the future. After that, there's Mary Mauser, who plays Daniel LaRusso's daughter, Samantha. She was just a delight to watch. I don't know what it was. I was loving this character. She's smart. She's sympathetic. She's also got that martial arts background to where she can have an intelligent conversation with the hyper martial arts culture of this show. She's a very capable person in that regard. But what I really liked about her was that there was this also a really good theme directed at teenagers of what happens when you're that kid who's born rich, who's born beautiful, who's born likable, popular. Well, you gravitate towards the popular clique, and you leave behind your less popular friends, and she communicates that struggle without being a horrible person. Like, you actually feel sympathetic for her because, you know, you probably would have done it too. She was an extraordinarily likable person. I'm really hoping she's not one of those hideous, evil Lindsay Lohan type actresses, and that we continue to hear all these happy stories of how everyone loves her. I'm really hoping to see her for a lot of years because she's just the most adorable little thing in the world, and I loved her in this show. But she's not my favorite young character. There's one who just, I can't even tell you why, but it's just awesome. All right, this guy, Eli, played by Jacob Bertrand. Eli, my goodness. I can't even tell you about this character because of the awesome spoilers associated with him, but I will say he was the most transformative character I've ever seen. Besides maybe like the aliens from Alien. No, like I gotta hand it to this kid because the plot required him to go through a lot. He played two different versions of himself, and both of them he played extraordinarily well. I mean, the first half you felt extremely sympathetic to him. He really sold this pathetic victim of circumstance that, you know, you felt truly sorry for. And then after that, after that, he had this amazing transformation that was so incredibly motivating. I felt motivated in like the deepest core of my toxic masculinity because of how awesome he eventually became as far as the writing for the plot. Now, I can't really tell you about that except that what it required is an actor who could fully commit to both sides of the story. You had to feel his pain in the first act, and you had to like fully be embraced by his awesomeness in the second. And he had to pull that off. And this actor, he totally did. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not really happy with where the plot took him. Like the plot took him, especially in that end, the plot took him to a place that I didn't like. I thought it really spoiled a lot of it. But as far as the acting, he did it perfectly. So, I mean, wow, Jacob Bertrand, I'm loving you right now. If you see this, I'm loving you, dude. I can't blame you for the plot, but I can say that you fully did your job very good. Okay, something else worth mentioning that the show did really well is that it captured a few other things. The first theme that they captured very well was this theme of parenting. Like, this I think is important for those of us who have grown up with the series. It's like the show aged with us, and not in a bad way. Not in a bad way. The original 1984 Karate Kid is actually older than me. All right, I was born in 1985, so the fact that this show is older than me, these characters needed to have a lot of evolution. So now they are both parents, and quite frankly, they both suck at it. Now one of them, Dana LaRusso, grows up to be very wealthy and successful, and what you see in his kids are kids who make incredibly bad choices. The daughter, it's like she's a good kid being surrounded by a bad clique, but his son is just detestable. I saw no reason to even write his son into the plot. He was just detestable. And I mean, if the only purpose for it was to say that, you know, he's a bad parent, well, great. I hated that little kid. But on the other hand, you have Johnny Lawrence, who is also a horrible father. So that works into the story in that both of them are trying to redeem themselves as parents and to do a good job actually raising their kids. And part of the way that they do that, maybe a distraction, is that they try to redeem their parenting through their students. And that's a huge conflict that, in all honesty, it gets complicated and convoluted. Maybe kind of forces the story a little bit harder than it needed to be for a 10-episode show. It could have been done better, but the theme of parenting is really good in that I think that people from my generation who liked the original movies and wanted to keep watching it, you know, there's something for you there that you can sympathize with these two characters as fathers now. So that's something that I guess is a necessary addition to the original storyline, is this idea of fatherhood. And this idea of raising not only your kids, but just raising all kids with the understanding that they're going to need to defend themselves, but also just how hard it is to be a parent in the modern age. Okay, one last thing that I actually liked was that in this show, you saw a few themes that you really don't see coming from Silicon Valley culture. Like, I said that I was very nervous about how Silicon Valley was in control of this franchise, because Silicon Valley has a really bad habit of really ham-handedly forcing their views into every one of their pieces. If you watch Netflix, it seems like they go out of their way to attack conservatives, to attack Christians, to attack anything that isn't a very, very progressive view of the world. And that's really isolated them in that most people in the world don't agree with everything they say, but if you don't, then you're going to be cast as the villain. Now, the original Karate Kid actually had all the bullies were these extremely rich, extremely handsome, white, blonde-haired Aryan guys. And I don't know how much that was intentional, but But back then, they really had that theme. Now, the show still sort of has this idea that rich people are evil, which that's an overused trope, that rich people are evil. I really wish more films and shows would try to get away from that and say, maybe poor people could be evil too, or maybe rich people could be good. It's just it's getting old. Besides that, the actual bully clique, the group of bullies in this new this new Cobra Kai, the bullies are actually an incredibly diverse group of kids. Now you can see like you can see the image I took of the Cobra Kai kids. I mean, they're a very, very diverse group, but so are the bullies. Now I couldn't find a good image of them, but you have a group that it includes not only gorgeous, handsome people, but there's overweight kids, there's white kids, there's black kids, and the lead bully is actually an Asian guy. So the bullies are incredibly diverse. Now I thought this was a really smart thing to do. I really like this because by making everyone diverse, it really paints the picture that you don't have one group are always evil, one group are always the victims, but just saying, this is how people act in situations. And I like that. It was actually a lot more progressive than most of the stuff you'll see on Netflix, where if they had made this, guaranteed all the bad people would have been white males. That's not the case in this Cobra Kai. Here, everyone's bad because everyone can be corrupted, and that's a very smart thing. They actually did that, and because they did that, you could just focus on listening to these human stories. You could focus on the fact that you had the Hispanic main protagonist, that the first girl to enter. There was actually a very funny scene where Johnny Lawrence had to be convinced to allow a girl into Cobra Kai, and that whole episode was well done, I think. But everyone in this show has diversity in it, and that's good that you pit that against each other, because it helps you get past this conversation, that endless conversation that feels like it's starting to get a beating by now. Now they can just go on with the story, which Cobra Kai did a really good job on. Okay, so some things I didn't like. They really went far with the language, and I don't want to sound like the boring old guy, but they really went far with the language insofar as I don't feel like I could watch this with my kids. The original movies, I actually watched those as a child with my mom. She could use all these stories as teachable moments for me to help me try to understand the world that I was about to grow into. And I'm not saying that the old ones were perfectly G-rated. They weren't. But they were something that I don't think I would feel uncomfortable watching with my daughter whenever she's 6 to 10. Cobra Kai, it throws out several F-bombs, several times where they curse just for no reason at all. It doesn't add to the plot. It's gratuitous edginess. Okay? It's just gratuitous. And it's that sort of feeling like you know that you're really cool if you cuss unnecessarily, and it's cool to have kids and it's like, maybe that is a good way to bait in kids to watch it, but it's not really something that, this is a show that's based on things that happened 30 years ago. Okay, that's based on a movie that happened 30 years ago. A huge portion of the people who want to watch that show are those kids who grew up. And they're people who appreciated it so much when they were kids that they wanted to be part of the tradition for their kids. Okay, there are certain shows in this world that are generational, that you want your kids to experience them the same way that you did. Okay, think about the Wizard of Oz. That was produced before World War II. The Wizard of Oz is a movie that was made before World War II, yet it will never die. It is always going to become, it's always going to stay a part of our culture, because people are going to continue to want to share that with their kids. The Karate Kid, it's not the greatest produced movie in the history of the world, but it had these themes that people loved, and they wanted to share, and they wanted to continue, and it's one of those movies that the lessons in it are stuff that can help you grow as a person. If you're a good parent, you want that. Now, Cobra Kai, it's like there's such good lessons, especially relevant lessons to right now. But I wouldn't feel good showing this to my kids. If I was a teacher and I tried to show it in class, I would actually risk getting fired. And it's like, I just feel like the producers shot themselves in the foot just for, 30 words throughout the show added just for edginess. Okay, like they didn't need it and didn't add anything to the plot. But it really ruined it for me. Like I was talking to my wife about it and how, I would love for my daughter and whatever kids that we have later, I would love for her to be able to watch the Karate Kid movies with me. Like, when it's getting late and about to be her bedtime, we could watch one of the movies, and every night we could do that. And then after, like, the 5th movie in the series, she'd be like, okay, well, can we watch the next one? It was like, yeah, sure, but to finish the story, we're going to have to wait 10 years until you grow up. And it's like, come on. So I really wish that whenever people would take the lesson from this, in that if you're going to remake something that I loved as a child, that I might want to share with my children, make it to where I can watch it with my children. So in the future, I hope that people will take into consideration, let this be something I can share with my kids, and maybe this thing that you've created, my kids will make sure their kids watch it too. Think about that. Like, think about the long-term effects of how can your show be something culturally significant rather than quarterly profitable. All right, and this next part has a few spoilers. So, I mean, you've been warned. Now, what I really didn't like with this series is, like, I love the whole first 10 episodes. It was only in the last half of the last episode that I really became troubled. It was like you've heard my concerns about how Silicon Valley would somehow get their little claws into the theme and moral of the story. Well, in that last episode, you kind of, because like we've built this theme on you've got to learn how to defend yourself, and you can't change people, and you can't change society. You have to learn how to empower your own self to deal with problems that will come your way. Okay, that was a major theme, and I was really happy that Cobra Kai did such a great job at communicating that. But in that last bit, of the story, you saw this culture evolve within the students of Cobra Kai to where, I guess to put it simply, they turned evil. I mean, all the kids, each one of them turned into these horrible monsters. And the implication was that by doing this, that by learning how to stand up for yourself and by acting in a way that is self-empowering, that is itself making a person evil. That's the implication. It's absurd. It crapped on the work done setting up the first 10 episodes, what happened at the end. That whole ending was really disappointing for me, and I'm kind of nervous as to how they're gonna salvage it. I would like to see where they go with it. If maybe there's some sort of rebalance that happens in the next series, or excuse me, in the next season. But it felt like they started off with these amazing themes, but then tried to work in that those mentalities, that mentality of learning how to take care of yourself, learning how to defend yourself and others, learning how to not be a victim, actually makes people evil. I wasn't digging how it ended. It left a sour taste in my mouth. They're gonna have to do a really good job to salvage that, so they don't spoil all the greatness, not only of the first 9 episodes, but of all the movies up to this point. Overall, I actually did like the show. I thought the actors did a great job. I thought there was a lot of good themes that would have a good conversation. There's some things I would have changed. But I really want to know what you thought. If you tried out the show, if you thought that there were things that were just, it was absolutely terrible, let me know. If you thought it was great and that I'm being too critical, let me know that too. I want to hear from you guys what you thought. Anyway, let me know down at the bottom. And that's my review of Cobra Kai. And that's another week in the books. If you like this week's episode, make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. And don't forget that the War Elephant is supported by fan donations. So if you want to see more content like this, visit the Patreon link to find out how. Thank you for joining me on War Elephant Past in Review.